Hello, what is up? It's Austin here from PlebDevs, and I wanted to do a video on a post I made a few months back, March 4th, looks like, some tips for landing your first developer job. And so this is a big question that I get a lot, and I get it asked in a lot of different ways, and there's a complicated answer to this question, and I tried to write down all of my experience here as simple as possible and kind of break it down into categories. So I'm gonna walk through this and then walk through some of the comments here, where some of the comments are actually pushing back a little bit on some of the things I'm saying, which is really nice. But in general, this is a framework that I learned through trial and error and have used to be able to get jobs multiple times as a developer, specifically in Bitcoin, but this is generic. It's general beyond Bitcoin, and what I've learned and what everyone knows that has become a programmer, especially if they were self-taught or they didn't go through any official means like college and boot camp, something they'll all tell you is that first 0 to 1 is very difficult. That first job is the hardest to get. But once you get that first job, once you break into the industry as a programmer, as a developer, whatever technical thing you're doing, then it gets easier from there, and you've kind of proven yourself. I mean, not if you get fired in like the first few weeks or something like that, but you keep the job for long enough, you do well enough, then you've kind of broken into the industry and you're in a completely different place. So that is definitely true. But getting to the 0 to 1, that's what's so difficult. So I want to walk you through my framework of how I think about this and kind of show you some examples along the way. Sweet. So someone in PlebDevs asked me this question recently. I'm writing a longer form post with a lot of grueling detail about my specific path, but I'll drop some high-level thoughts here. And yeah, would love to hear some anecdotes. That's what I said. So all in all, it took me about 10 months to land my first programming job out of my full stack boot camp. Over these 10 months, I applied to 250 plus positions. I didn't start with the best resume, portfolio, process for the job hunt, but I learned over time through trial and error. If I could go back in time with the knowledge I have now, I feel like I could have cut it down to 2 to 3 months max. But hey, that's not how life works. So yeah, a lot of what people go through in this journey is actually just learning what works for them and learning what they're missing. So this was definitely the case for me. If I had the information I did now, I mean, I really could have theoretically coached myself through working on the most important projects, framing my portfolio, my resume in kind of the perfect way to at least get some kind of position sooner. So for someone who's starting fresh, I would begin with the mindset and understanding that this might take a very long time. Of course, once you land your first position, it is way easier to get another. It's always the 0 to 1 that's a real barrier to entry. Cool. So from my experience, I suggest you focus on these 4 things: history of work, resume, portfolio, and a job hunt system. I say focus on these 4 things, but really this is kind of how I see the high-level process of what you're trying to show, I guess, points 1 through 3, and then the system at which you're kind of gauging with that, which is the job hunt system. So let's start with talking about history of work. This is the most important one right here. So this is, I mean, if you're learning how to code right now, this is the journey you're in. This first step, history of work, you spend the first full year and a half, 2 years maybe, just on this one piece right here. Now, maybe you're fast. Some people are fast. Some people can pick up coding very solidly in 6 months or even 3 months and build some really strong projects and build kind of a good junior portfolio. So maybe that's you. Don't let me slow you down with my advice if that's the case. But for me, it took like literally 3 years, but I'm not the smartest guy, so maybe you can figure it out a little bit quicker. So history of work, create a history of work that shows you have the skills to be a developer. I mean, that's really what you're trying to do with this history of work. You're trying to show that you have the skills, and normally, and I guess in other sorts of jobs, other sorts of ecosystems, you sort of prove your history of work with, I mean, your previous literal work history where you were hired, but maybe like a college degree, maybe a master's degree or something like that. But in programming, it's much different. You just do stuff that's cool, and you show it off, and you get to frame it yourself, which is actually kind of cool, but it makes it difficult as well, because you need to market yourself, you need to brand yourself, and developers and people that want to be developers are not often good at that. So history of work, so use GitHub, portfolio, and deployed projects to show this off. Make sure the biggest and best are front and center on your portfolio website. Push code every day if you can. Build a personal project that solves some kind of problem for yourself or someone else. Contribute to open source. Do example projects from YouTube tutorials. Build free websites for your friend's lawn mowing business, etc. Literally just push as much relevant work as you can, and show it off from best to least, right? So that's kind of everything thrown together, and I'll break it down here into bullet points a bit more. So push commits on GitHub every day if you can. Build up as long and strong of a history of work on GitHub as you can. If you don't know what GitHub is, I mean, it's something you definitely need to learn as a developer. If you go to PlebDevs.com, my first course here, Lightning Wallet Front End, there's a lesson on GitHub, basically. It's called Learn Your Development Environment, I believe, and I show like GitHub and how to set up VS Code and stuff like that, and kind of explain the importance of that. But I mean, we can go to my GitHub, and something I've prioritized and that's done me a huge service is prioritizing these green squares right here. Prioritizing trying to push code every day that I can. Even if they're examples, even if it's just a small improvement to a small project, just push code every day and do it across time. And eventually, I mean, honestly, if you do anything out of all of this, if you're just pushing real work to GitHub, eventually you'll just make it. Something will work out. But yes, that's an important piece, something that I emphasize a lot. So push commits on GitHub every day if you can. Okay, create side projects, quote unquote side projects, that solve some kind of problem for yourself or someone else. The more niche, specific, unique, the better. If you're able to get any users for this project, that is the best case scenario. Be sure to make it clear that your project has users on your portfolio. So side projects, this is like the holy grail of history of work if you're a programmer that's never had a job before. And people overcomplicate this, but really niche down, make it super specific, make it super unique. And if it actually solves some kind of real problem, even a dumb problem, that is very cool. So examples, people might build tools for, I've heard of like tools for D&D, for making D&D characters. Someone's built like a website to do that, or a dashboard. Building a website for your WoW guild. Something I did is I built a simple website that would let me pull all of my Facebook data down from Facebook very easily, and then like explore it in a UI, of course without giving my data to anyone else. And that was like a simple, very specific side project that I was passionate about, and got like maybe 3 to 10 users on it. But it was something that like, once it worked and I built it and I had a few people that tried it, I made sure to emphasize that. And so that was a huge win. So yeah, some kind of side project. You want to get to this eventually, but for a lot of people, you're still building all of the smaller skills in order to make something that's a little more complete. But yeah, don't overcomplicate it, but make something that you think is cool, solve some kind of your own problem. Yeah, okay, so if it was your unique creation and you built it from scratch, and especially if you had any users, then this is some of the highest signal work you can ship as far as landing a job. So I'm really just emphasizing myself here again. Okay, create example projects following a tutorial. Frame it as example, not a tutorial project. And you don't need to mention you took a tutorial to build it. So these example projects are best when you take one to learn a new tool, such as Tailwind. You might build a whole to-do list app or a Netflix clone following a tutorial just to pick up Tailwind and have an example of it. That is perfect as an example project. So example projects, these are things that a lot of times you might not necessarily want to put front and center on your portfolio or show off first, but it's something that you can do in an hour and a half. This is something I would do. I remember I wanted to learn Mongo, so I just looked up a video on how to build a project with Mongo and React, and I already knew React. And so I built this whole project, and now it lives as an example for me of the one time I did Mongo and how I learned Mongo. So I just set that aside. I frame it as an example. It's another just completed app. Whoever might be looking through my portfolio or my history of work in the future, they don't need to know that I followed a tutorial. You know, the project was for me. I built it, I set it aside. And they might even think that that's impressive, that I'm someone that just builds side projects to learn stuff or to have examples. So example projects, that's kind of just the framing I put on it, which is basically the kind of project that you don't need to author yourself, but that you can follow a process or tutorial to learn. Okay, so create freelance projects. This is another kind of framing I have for a different kind of project. So this can be any kind of programming related task or project that you do for someone else or some company or startup. Does your friend have a lawn mowing business? Build a website for it and put it on your portfolio. Does your brother cut hair? Build him a badass barber website. Put these projects on your portfolio and frame them as freelance work. So this is, I bring up the lawn mowing thing specifically because this is something I did when I think I was out of boot camp by this time. I was just desperate to build anything that would slightly improve my portfolio and kind of show more of a breadth of the kind of work I could do. So my friend had a lawn mowing business, and I didn't even ask him. I just told him, I'm going to build you a website. If you like it, maybe you can pay me for it, but I don't even care. I just want to build this for you and show that I built this for a real business. So I built him this lawn mowing website. I just copied the info from his Facebook page that he had, and I threw it up, and it looked pretty all right. And there we go. Immediately put it on my portfolio. I don't even remember if he used it, but he let me make it. So, it was something that was hey, this is a freelance project I did for my friend's small business that, and it was just a different framing I had on one of my projects, something else I could talk about in my portfolio. So that's another kind of project you might do to fill out your history of work. Okay, finally, contribute to open source. This is an especially high signal one in Bitcoin and any kind of open source ecosystem. Find an open source project that you love or are familiar with and scour their GitHub issues for a good first issue tag. This is the best place to start. Not every repo will be organized enough to have good first issues per se, but the issues is often where you're going to want to start looking. So any contribution you make to an open source project is a huge green flag for recruiters and will help you stand out from other candidates. So yeah, not much to say here. If you can already work on, even if it's something small, work on a project that's already serving real users, that's an amazing differentiator. It's great experience. But it can be really hard at first. I definitely struggled. It took me a while to contribute to my first open source project. I was probably a little bit too ambitious with what I wanted to work on. So stay humble, but it still took me a while. So don't just get discouraged if you're new and it's still very difficult to jump into a whole new open source project and figure something out. But yeah, a great thing to do. Okay, so that's basically history of work. So a lot of what this is here is pushing commits. And besides that, it's building projects of different kinds and with different framings for different purposes. So, okay, so next up, let's go into resume. I guess one last thing I'll say on history of work for me, and something I'm so glad that I did this, is if we go back to my GitHub, I have a lot of repositories here, 232. It's not because I'm so productive. It's really not because I'm so productive. It's because literally everything I've ever worked on since I started coding is in these repos. A lot of these are unfinished. A lot of these are simple example projects that I built off of, you know, maybe a YouTube tutorial, or I built during my boot camp or something like that. So not all of these are very impressive. This, yeah, some of this, like this is from Base 58. My Base 58 homework is up here. But what's so cool is if I've done something one time, then and I push it up to GitHub, it's saved forever, and I have that as a reference and an example. And for me, that feels like having tools in the tool shed. It feels like having ammunition, and it makes me feel really good, because I know that if I do something once, even if I completely forget about it, there's a reference for it. I've written code for it before. It's saved, it's backed up, and I can basically pick up to where I was last. So that's another huge benefit of just like pushing all of your work to GitHub. It's advantageous in a lot of ways. Okay, let's move on. So next is resume. Build a developer resume that frames your journey, shows off your relevant experience and skills, and passes all pre-screening steps, whether it be automated CV scanning software or an HR lady without her coffee. So what do I mean by this? So, you know, having a we spend a lot of time on our resume, but recruiters do not spend that much time on a resume. They'll spend like 6 seconds on average looking at your resume. So you need your resume to be good, but you also need it to be good in a different way. Good in the way that maybe like a YouTube thumbnail is good, or an Instagram picture is good, something like that. Like it needs to be almost clickbaity, easy to see, easy for them to read. And when they're reading that resume over the course of 6 seconds or whatever, you want them to see everything that they're looking for in a candidate. And so that's kind of what I talk about here, breaking down under these bullet points. So look at developer resumes online, and pay attention to the format and the structure that they have on your own. So I mean, you can Google this. You can Google like 100 different developer resume examples, right, and see what other people do that are way more experienced than you, and just start with that structure. So that is something I definitely did. Create a short contact section with your name, email, location, and link to your portfolio website. So here, I guess I'm kind of just describing the structure that you should take, and I'll show you my resume as an example. Create an about section that is short and concise. So this is kind of from the top down. So we're gonna have a context section, create an about section that is short and concise, but at the same time it tells your story and frames yourself as a fast learner who is passionate about becoming a developer. That seems kind of specific, but it's specific for a reason, because if you're new, this is kind of like, almost no matter who you are, if you're new, this is how you want to frame yourself. That you're a fast learner, and that you're passionate about becoming a developer. That you're on the come up, and if this recruiter or company doesn't get you now, then someone else is going to get you soon. And that you're that guy, you're that person that is definitely going to become a developer, that is a natural. Even if you don't actually feel that way, just whatever your story is, kind of frame it within this lens here. Okay, cool. So don't call it work or projects on your resume. Frame it as quote unquote experience. So you're gonna have an experience section. And under that experience section, you can put your biggest and best developer projects, as well as any actual work experience you have. So this is just, you know, one of those things that maybe you don't know, and I didn't know at first, is like you can frame for your resume, for your portfolio. You're the author of this. You can frame it however you want. You can frame yourself however you want. And most people will be kind of squeamish and a little bit, you know, a little bit too humble with it. But this is one place that you can seriously differentiate yourself. So just take the framing of experience. Any experience is just your biggest and best work within this domain that you've done. So that's how I frame it. So add a skill section that is 2 to 3 lines in total and lists out technologies you know and utilize in your projects, such as JavaScript, Tailwind, Git, C++, etc. This will serve you by helping your resume pass keyword scans that HR will run every resume through. Bigger companies and some startups do this. Yeah, so it's good to just, for one, it's good to list out your skills. That's a useful thing for anyone who might even actually be taking the time to read your resume. but it's also, you know, there's software. What do they, I don't even remember what they call this software, but it's basically software that every bigger HR team uses to scan through all of their incoming resumes and basically give them a likelihood of like, is this resume even worth a human looking at? And so a lot of the criteria of these programs that they'll run your resume through are just keyword scans. And so they'll be looking for specific keywords that have to do with the job. So yeah, maybe JavaScript, maybe React, maybe backend, maybe AWS. Not backend, that's just a generic term. You want these to be literal, actual skills, something specific. So that was a bad example. But yeah, so add a skill section. The experience section should take up most of your resume. The skills should take up 2 to 3 lines. You should have contact info at the top, the about me below that. At the very bottom, you can put an education section. Keep yours as short as you want. Mine was incredibly short because all I had was a GED at the time. So yeah, I think there was even versions of my resume that didn't have an education section at all. But let's look at my resume. This is my most recent resume that I've been running around with. And a little bit contrary to my advice, I take up way more space than I would suggest you take in my about me. But I did this for a very specific reason. I did this because in this resume, I've been specifically looking for jobs that, how would I put this? Jobs that utilize my skills being a communicator. I say that as I'm struggling over my words. Basically, I'm looking for jobs that are merging together my joy of communicating and making videos like this, and also being a developer. And it's a very, very specific niche. So I'm really trying to frame that I'm this guy that is not only a dev, but that loves to teach and communicate with other devs. And that's kind of what I'm trying to communicate in this about me. As well as, I mean, I'm literally telling my journey. So, okay, pretty big about me section. We've got the contact info up here. I squished it down just as small as I possibly could. We see we've got a link to my website. We've got a link to my email, and then my location, remote or Austin, Texas, where I'm basically saying like, this is where I live, but I'm down to go anywhere, or I'm down to work from anywhere. So yeah, so I have a small skills section here, just kind of hitting on the biggest and the best. Yeah. So these are definitely, yeah, my strongest tools here, but you know, not too much thought on which ones I put on and which ones I left out. Just try to pick the most relevant skills that I use pretty often. Okay, and then we have projects and experience here. This is another place where I differentiated from the fold. But once again, this is because I knew I owned the framing. So normally in my like original resume when I was new, it was just experience, and my experience was a mix of my projects and some of my actual work. But here I set projects aside because I want to show you that PlebDevs right here is at the top. And I'm saying PlebDevs is my project, right? I'm the founder. It's the one project on the project section. And I basically give you, yeah, the details here. I'm the founder. Here's the timeline. Here's the website. And then bullet points explaining some of the stuff I do, giving you the high level, everything you'd want to know about that. And then under experience, I just have different experience I've done working for companies. And then under education, squished it down as much as possible. And this is all I have. My high school diploma, I have my boot camp where I learned full stack development, and then Base 58 where I learned about Bitcoin protocol. So shout out to Base 58. Okay, so this is my resume. It's really not the best. It's honestly not the best. I could do a lot better. But given everything I have, I knew it would be good enough. It's a simple template. Some people like to make their template a little more fancy, a little more styled. So look at a lot of examples, but this is mine, and this is one that's gotten me offers as of recently. Okay, so we talked about resume. We've talked about history of work. Let's talk about portfolio next. So build a personal website. or people will call that personal website a portfolio. It shows off everything you have, but it's still easy to read and scroll through. Recruiters, hiring managers, or lead engineers will be looking at this as you're applying. They'll only give you seconds of your time. Make sure that what they see in those seconds gets you to the next round. So a little bit of the same idea as the resume, but a little more stylized. This is your personal landing page. And there's a few tips that I name here that you want to keep in mind. So create a personal website portfolio with a domain name that is close to your name or NIM online. I guess you don't have to do this necessarily. You can call yourself, the super excited dev.com or something like that. You can come up with other names, but this is just something I did. Like my original website was like austinkelsey.codes or something like that. And I'll show you my current website in a minute. Look at as many dev portfolio website examples as you can for examples on how you should structure yours. So yeah, same thing as the resumes, find inspiration, see what works for other people. Keep it dead simple at first. Don't spend too much time on this. I spent way too much time on my very first portfolio because I was telling myself it's my landing page. It has to be beautiful. It has to be eye-catching. It has to be unique. And maybe you'll get there, but I wish I would have started simple because I actually ended up wasting too much time on it. So make sure it renders fast within 3 seconds max. This is also a mistake I made. In my quest to try and make it look pretty, I made it extremely inefficient and it would be really slow. You can go, if you search like website speed check, test my website speed. Yeah, so a lot of these will try, there's one I always use, GT metrics, that's it. This is one I always use, so I can go, let's go to HTTPS, this is my personal website, bitcoinpleb.dev. Let's see how fast. Okay, we'll come back to this. We'll see how fast it renders. It has to like run a job in the cloud or something. But it'll tell us all of that details. Okay, so make sure it renders fast. If you're a front-end dev, it has to look pretty on every viewport size. If you're a back-end dev, just make it simple and clean. Yeah, it's kind of true. I mean, I tell you, don't spend too much time on it, but if you're only going after front end, it has to look nice. That doesn't mean it has to be fancy or extra. It just has to look nice, and it needs to scale down to the mobile sizes and everything like that, like perfectly. Port generated. No. It's not showing me. Okay, well. Used to be free. But I can also just I can visit my website. I'll show you my website. Let's visit it. Okay, that loads pretty quick. I actually have it open right here. Let's finish the tips and I'll finish showing you that. Put your name, contact, about section at the top. Don't take up too much space. Put your project section right at eye level as soon as it renders. I might not even be following this rule. Link to each project repo and deployment if it has one. Okay, so let's see what I have. Okay, so that's basically the case. You can start to see my work kind of immediately right here, and there's a small contact section. So this is my portfolio. It's mainly a single page, and I've got work right here, and I've got my best projects at the top, or most recent best that I want you to see. And then I've got a show more button, and I've got just a lot more projects down here. I have a media section. You probably don't need this, but I kind of need this for the kinds of jobs I was applying for, just showing them that I could do media, that I could record videos and speak and stuff like that. I have a skills section here at the bottom where I kind of, from a high level, just frame out my main areas of skill, I guess. I have an about, and then contact, and I think this just goes to my email. I link out to all my relevant social media. And a little extra thing I did was I added a lightning address to this website and a little button right here that will actually allow you to tip me 21 sats. Payment successful. Cool. So that was just a little extra thing I sprinkled in to be like, yeah, I'm that guy. I'm that lightning dev. Okay, so that was my portfolio. Yeah, not too much else to say here. Okay, the job hunt system. So this is the final piece of my framework here. So the job hunt is a grind. Create a system for consistently finding jobs, applying to jobs, improving your career artifacts, and shipping new work. If you do these 4 things, find, apply, improve, ship, then winning is inevitable. It's just a question of how long it will take. So yeah, I mean, this is kind of the process. It's like once you have a solid enough history of work, you have a basic resume, you have a basic portfolio, now you're in the job hunt system, and now you go through this looping iterative process where you're finding new jobs to apply to, you're applying to those jobs, and then at that point you apply, and what happens? Do they respond to you? Oftentimes they don't. So what is your response to getting ignored is you immediately go to slightly improving your career artifacts in any way. I call them career artifacts. That's what they started calling them in my boot camp. I don't know, but that's just basically your portfolio, your resume, your GitHub, the descriptions, the copy, and all of that, how you're framing yourself, just making it 1% better. And then shipping new work. And of course, shipping new work is a way to do that, to fill out your portfolio. Or maybe you do this new project, and now this new project is like maybe one of the best projects you've ever done. Maybe it's the best side project you've ever done, right? So it's just that looping process. You find, you apply, you improve what you've got, you ship new work, and you do that for long enough, and yeah, getting that first job, it's inevitable. Okay, create a spreadsheet listing out positions you're going to apply for and those that you have applied for. So just make a simple spreadsheet. Every time you find a job, put it on there. And when you apply for it, put it on there. And maybe even a copy of like a cover letter and a resume. I don't know if I mentioned cover letter in here. Yeah, okay, I do. So we'll get to that in a second. Search for positions on typical job boards like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, but also look on the AngelList job board, Y Combinator job board, and of course all of the Bitcoin specific job boards, Bitcoiner jobs, Stacker News. Right here, there's a job section, and then there's Bitcoin Talent Co. So check those out. And Y Combinator and AngelList, if you don't know, these are just where a lot of startups list their opening positions. So cool, yeah. So those are places you can find jobs. I mean, yeah. Okay, create a cover letter for positions you're interested in or that look like a perfect fit. So I wouldn't always make a cover letter for every job I applied for, but the ones that seemed really special, a really good fit, or that my skills matched up with them, I would really try and get them. So those are the ones I would likely make a cover letter for. And continuing on with the cover letter, the first cover letter is hardest to make, but once you have it, you can pretty easily refactor it for new positions. As you continue to refactor it with more and more positions, you will refine and improve it over time. Yeah, this is what happened for me. So I made one cover letter. It took forever. I hated making it, but then it worked, and I made it for this one specific company. But then once there was the next company that I wanted a cover letter for, I just forked that one over. I refactored maybe 3 or 4 sentences out of it, and made sure all the names and dates and everything were correct for the company. And okay, and then I had another one, and then I forked it again, and I forked it again. And every time I did this, I just kind of sharpened it and polished it over time to where it was shorter. It told my story and framed it perfectly. And then there would just be a few sentences about the company and the position that would be what I would refactor each time. All right, take any feedback you get from companies you apply to. List it on your spreadsheet and learn from it. Yeah, so you normally don't get feedback in this process. That's why it's so hard when you're a junior applying, trying to get your first job is, you'll just get ignored. Like it's not like people will tell you like, oh, you're just not experienced enough. Oh, you had this on your resume. It wasn't right for us. No, it's just, it'll be radio silence. So when you do get feedback, take it down, take it to heart, and just at least list it on your spreadsheet. Okay, as you get past the first round with any positions, look up the company on Glassdoor or similar resources and see if you can figure out what their technical interview is like. Practice any specific algorithm problems, take-home projects, or technologies they use for their technical interviews. So this is just a little bit of something you can do. I've found this before with jobs I've applied to. I've looked them up on Glassdoor, and someone said that, like, yeah, I did a technical interview and they had me do the two-sum problem or something like that, which is just, two-sum is just a very basic algorithm problem. And so I looked that problem up and I learned it, and what do you know? They used it on me in the interview, and then I was prepared. Is this cheating? I mean, I don't know. Is it cheating? The information's out there. Maybe they should be mixing it up more. But either way, I don't know. For me, I was obsessed with getting my first job. I had to get it. I was running out of money. So this is a way to get an edge, and it was a way that I got an edge. At least it worked for me one time. So consider doing this. Practice doing technical interviews by yourself. Role play as if you are in the interview. Verbalize your thought process. Turn Zoom screen share on. Get comfortable trying to solve hard problems with silent observers. So I guess this kind of doubles on the back of this point before. Maybe you're not that good at algorithm problems. I didn't really start to learn algorithm problems or practice them until I was starting to apply for jobs. This is something I almost don't want to tell people to focus on, because it's something that's almost only necessary when you're in technical interviews, but it's something you need to at least get comfortable with. And the thing that you really want to get comfortable with is writing code in front of silent observers, writing code in an interview, and verbalizing your thought process. And when you're stuck, not just freezing up and going silent, but being like, okay, I don't know this, so I thought this would happen, but it didn't happen, so let's go back earlier, let me talk through my thoughts, right? You just want to be able to verbalize that and show them how you're problem solving, and show them that you're comfortable with a problem, you're comfortable being outside of your understanding. And it's really how you carry yourself. It's really the swagger at which you can be in this technical interview and withstand the pressure that will impress them, and how you talk about the problem as you're working through it. And so I've gotten offers from companies even when I didn't finish the problem in their technical interview, but just because they're like, all right, he didn't finish the problem, but we like this guy, he's clearly a coder, he could communicate with us, blah blah blah. So okay, so that is on technical interviews. Finally, watch YouTube tutorials for developer job hunting and technical interview practices. This is an example of that, I suppose. There's lots of other videos out there. That's a lot of where I learned how to frame this whole giant problem set of finding my first developer job, is by watching other people's YouTube videos and hearing about their experiences. So maybe you have friends in person as well that have done this. Talk to them. I didn't. All I had is YouTube. So okay, wow, a lot there. That took a little longer than I thought, but let's look through some of the comments here to see some of maybe the pushback I got and other tips that people threw in. Okay, so Elvis Mercury said, this is great advice generally. I'll add my .02 to part 1 of it as someone who has hired a bunch. So Elvis is telling us he's someone who's actually hired people. So this is great advice. Advice any pleb dev wants. Having a portfolio is great, much better than not having one. But I am very little impressed by toy projects where you built a CRUD app or whatever. Again, I'm happy to see that you've done it versus not doing it, but you know what I really want? A real project where you built something that you cared about and solved your own problem. This is, even today, differentiating. So many toy projects, so many class projects. At best, you will convince me that you have adequately learned how to do thing X, but I come away knowing nothing else about you. On the other hand, if you show me the app you wrote to track your D&D sessions, and you excitedly explain why you had a need for it and how it fulfills your need, I will straighten up in my chair and pay close attention. The nice thing about this advice is that A, it's universally applicable, whatever your level of sophistication. And B, the most humanizing possible strategy. Work on something you care about, build something awesome that makes you excited. Talking about it, such a thing lets you showcase your best and most enthusiastic self. I will hire for that all day long, or at least I did when I was doing that. So wow, 10 out of 10 advice from Elvis Mercury. Completely, really pushing back against my prior advice, talking about example projects. Or talking about maybe the freelance projects or something like that. He's saying like, everyone does these kinds of projects. Like, yeah, maybe it fills in your empty history of work at first, but what he really wants to see is the side projects. Remember, when I talk about that here, side projects, something that solves some kind of niche, specific, unique problem for yourself. And if you get anyone else to do that, then like, that moment when you're in the interview with someone like Elvis Mercury, what you can communicate with them, the passion that you can have behind it, will be a huge differentiator. Even to this day, he's saying, people still don't do this. So, this is something like, there were tons of better programmers than me throughout my boot camp, but almost none of them, they built a side project like I did, like something that was so custom and not even really ambitious, but just custom and focusing on a very specific problem that I cared about, and was able to talk about it with a lot of passion. So yes, amazing advice. Cool. So thank you, Elvis. I'm gonna zap that again. Zap that comment again. Everyone will know I made a video on this thread because it's from months ago. Okay, David W says, so much useful content in this post when it comes time to interview, ... Interview prep. Useful for other jobs like product, but I imagine there's parallels with dev roles too. Have found it's useful creating a spreadsheet of scenarios / mini projects where I've dealt with working with large data sets, interacting with third-party libraries, complex services, running experiments and tests, tight deadlines, speaking to users or research problem. Okay, so lots of examples here. So for each scenario, I logged 2+ examples of what was the situation, what I did myself, what was the result. Great to have that structure to jog your memory when it comes to the interview stage, to have many examples to draw upon. It's often the format which many recruiters prefer too, even if their questions are really generic. Cool, so this is really good advice. I forgot about this. So he's basically saying, I mapped out a bunch of common examples of problem sets or things that they might ask you in the interview where I was a part of it and something good happened, right? So he has this spreadsheet of all these examples and he can keep it in his kind of short-term memory and just have a great example to throw out whenever that recruiter or interviewer asks you a difficult question. So this is good. And maybe this is crazy. Maybe you could even give someone this sheet as well. Just like differentiate yourself. Like, hey, here's a list of really all the impressive things I could remember that I've done, like in a professional setting. I don't know, maybe that's a bad idea, but cool. A little bit of back and forth. Okay, my portfolio used to be 2 to 3 business cards for the companies that I founded and grew. Then 2020 changed all of that. These days I've been out of that micro entrepreneurial game for too long. Also, I am not interested in never going back into the fiat mines if it can be avoided. Since I'm more creative than pure dev, I need a direction, a project where I can build something that has at least a shot of getting real. And this is what I use to find like-minded people to do. Not so easy now that meat space is all still a bit messed up. Can't count on being able to travel or stay in the same country any longer in order to get businesses going the way I used to. On top of my wish list to create and grow Zap revenue, next is to take on work paying Bitcoin only. Okay, well, very nice goals there from Lightworks. But okay, cool. I think I touched on basically all the points I wanted to in this post and some of the comments I got. So thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. And yeah, I mean, reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter. I'm Bitcoin PlebDev on Twitter, as well as on Stacker News. You can get into the PlebDevs community on Discord from the plebdevs.com website right here. And just, yeah, find a place to reach out to me. I'd love to help you if you're on your job search journey, or even if you're just starting to learn how to code. So yeah, cheers, and I'll see you next time.